Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lunch Break Science. I'm Ariel Johnson from the Leakey Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting human evolution research and sharing discoveries in programs like this. Our scheduled episode featuring primatologist Christopher Schmidt has been postponed until June 17th, so be sure to tune in to meet Chris in 2 weeks. Today, we are rebroadcasting episode 17 of Lunch Break Science featuring primatologist Eduardo Fernandez-Duque. He'll be talking about owl monkey parental care in Argentina. Eduardo is one of my favorite Lunch Break Science guests, so I'm excited to share this episode replay with you all. The Owl Monkey Project, which Eduardo and his wife Claudia Valeja launched in 1996, has just recently celebrated its 25th anniversary. Let's send warm congratulations to Eduardo, Claudia, their family, and their team. Eduardo and Claudia, past Lunch Break Science guests Caroline Schupley and Jacinta Biener, and several more scientists are teaming up with the Leakey Foundation to raise money for the Primate Research Fund through an exclusive summer travel series of events. You'll be virtually transported to field sites around the world with these phenomenal scholars as your tour guides. There are 3 events in total on June 25th, July 7th, and August 26th. To learn more or register, click the link we have shared in the chat. Register for a single event by donating $100 or attend all 3 by donating $250. Donations will be quadruple matched by generous donors. You'll be protecting vulnerable primates, long-term field research sites, and their local staff members. Have an exclusive look behind the scenes at some pretty amazing locations, and much more. Now, let's start our episode replay featuring Eduardo Fernandez-Duque. Here with us today is Leakey Foundation grant recipient Eduardo Fernandez-Duque. Eduardo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ariel, for inviting me to participate in the series. It is both a pleasure and an honor.
Well, we're really excited for today. Eduardo's joining us from Connecticut in the United States, where he is professor of anthropology and the School of the Environment at Yale University. He studies male-female relationships, pair bonding, and parental care in several species of monogamous monkeys. This research takes him to the Tiputini Biodiversity Station in the Ecuadorian Amazon to study titi monkeys. Here's a photo of those adorable little monkeys. And also to the ranch Estancia Huaycalec in Formosa, Argentina to study owl monkeys. Here we have another adorable little monkey. We would like to start the episode, though, with congratulating Eduardo for receiving the John P. McGovern Award Lecture in Behavioral Sciences from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This is a prestigious award and honors his just tremendous contributions to behavioral science. So you can't hear everybody clapping for you, but if anyone would like to congratulate Eduardo, please feel free to do so in the chat. So previously on Lunch Break Science, we have heard about the behavior of our closest living relatives, chimpanzees. We've also heard about baboon behavior, and baboons occupy a very similar habitat to our early ancestors. When we look at monkeys, like owl monkeys, they're so different from us, or at least they seem very different from us. Why do we look at them to learn about our behavior and that of our early ancestors?
Well, Ariel, one of the reasons we like to look at a whole range of non-human primates, not just chimpanzees, is because it allows us to understand better the process of evolution, how different taxa, how different species, how different types of primates and monkeys may have got to be what they are through time. By doing this, we can understand better the range of circumstances that may have led our early human ancestors to evolve into us. So we look at owl monkeys, we look at titi monkeys, and owl monkeys and titi monkeys have certain features that we think may have been important in early human ancestors. We'll be talking about that later on, but they live in small groups, they form pair bonds, they share in parental duties. All those traits we think that may have been important in the evolution of early human ancestors. And these pair-living non-human primates are good models, good systems, where we can ask questions about the evolution of those behavioral patterns.
So, Eduardo, how did you become first interested in studying animal behavior?
It wasn't an epiphany. No, it was not from early on. So we can take care of that. No, when I was 6, I was not thinking of monkeys. But it is true that from very early on, as shown in this picture, I loved the outdoors and I loved animals. So I would spend every weekend in my grandpa's farm, just an hour away from Buenos Aires, riding horses, making fires, climbing on a windmill or a tree. Later on, as a young adult, I started going camping, and tent camping I really enjoyed. And then once a biology student in my early 20s, that became more frequent. And
Yeah.
so one of the most memorable experience that connect my passion for animals and the outdoors, and I really felt like I would share this, is that when I was probably 6 or 7, I went to a zoo in Buenos Aires. And it was possible then. I don't think they could do this now. They would invite somebody from the audience. My recollection is that there were 30, 50 people, and they would invite you to walk into the cage where the tigers were. And so they gave me a cub. I still have that memory of holding a tiger cub, a live tiger cub. And then together with the keeper, we walked from one part of the cage onto the second part of the cage where the female tiger was laying down. And I kind of put the cub, my recollection is probably less than 10 feet away from the female tiger. Probably that poor female tiger was probably with some drugged so that it wouldn't be posed at risk. But I love the animals from early on, and that's really what has kept me going with all this.
So you started studying biology and animal behavior. What were some of the early field research experiences that you got to have?
So like I was saying before, I mean, in the early 20s, I started doing some camping. And these first field experiences really started having Gloria Valeja, I mean, my girlfriend back then my wife, my colleague, lover, and friend. And so that there's a photo there of us getting on this very old Citroen 3CV, driving all the way to Patagonia. And then just a few days after we got married, we spent a whole month doing a Smithsonian Institution wildlife training and management course in Venezuela. So for a month, we slept in a hammock and we learned how to use telemetry and how to capture animals and how to set up a vegetation plot, all the things that then became very, very important, crucial really for when I had to launch my own field project in Argentina. So those were the first field experiences, and Claudia was a part already then, she's been a part of that ever since.
So when did you transition to studying anthropology and monkeys?
So in 1990, I went to UC Davis to the Animal Behavior Graduate Group to start my PhD. And what happened then, I was planning on, after my first year in the PhD program, working with my advisor, Robert Murphy, I became very interested in studying kin recognition in capybaras, these very large rodents from South America. But we also wanted to start our family, wanting to have kids. And Claudia decided that she would do her dissertation working with captive titty monkeys at UC Davis. And soon after I followed, so she led and I followed. And under the guidance and wonderful mentoring of Sally Mendoza and Bill Mason, I started working with the captive titty monkeys of the UC Davis Primate Center. And that's really what got me thinking and becoming very, very interested in anthropology and the study of monkeys as a way of understanding people. It also happened, I mean, these things that happened without one planning them, that psychology was housed in psychology at UC Davis. But in the same building, the Young Hall building, in the other wing of the building, anthropology was housed. And so that allowed me on a daily basis to really move back and forth between psychology and anthropology and meet some of my current colleagues today and learn a lot about primatology from an anthropological perspective, not just from a psychological perspective. And I discovered that and I became very, very interested. And so when I finished the PhD at UC Davis, I knew that I had lots of questions that I wanted to explore through the study of non-human primates, monkeys, namely in Argentina at that time.
So you went on to found the Owl Monkey Project, which is coming up on its 25th anniversary. How did that project begin, and did you have any idea when you started the longevity it would have?
Well, yes, the way it began, it's very, very pertinent to this wonderful conversation we're having. It began, like all projects begin, with a very small but extremely important and influential grant from the Leakey Foundation. So when I finished the PhD, I proposed to conduct a pilot study of monogamous primates in the Chaco region of Argentina. And the Leakey Foundation, I guess they trusted me, and they sent me with about $5,000. And I had my wife and I had two kids. We went to northern Argentina, to the province of Formosa. And I wanted to really start working either on titty monkeys, for which I needed to go to Paraguay, or owl monkeys, for something I could do in Argentina. And because I was in Argentina, I started by checking the ranch to see how things would go with the owl monkeys. And they went well. And on top of that, some of my fellow Argentinian citizens completely discouraged me from going to Paraguay, something that could have changed my history, and for all kinds of wrong reasons I could see a few years later. So I never went to Paraguay to check on the titty monkeys. I stayed in Formosa, and I started working. I mean, the first 1996, we just set up a tent, and that's all we did. We were in camp with that tent and that plastic. It became called the condom tent. We set up the tent, and then things moved from there. I mean, very, very basic facilities over the years, working with lots and lots of students from Argentina and from the States. And among all of us, we developed a system in the White Collect Ranch where we still work today. Did I ever think that I would be working on these 25 years? No. I think that most of us, I wish we could plan for 25 years. I'm sure we would be doing lots of things differently. You just plan for the next year. And then suddenly you realize that you've been doing that for 25 times. So we have now very, very comfortable ways of working, very well-defined systems for tracking the monkeys. We have a wonderful trail system. And all this, of course, I did with lots and lots of help. These are some of the students that come and work with us, but also it's been crucial, the support and the help that I got from my wife and colleague, Claudia Valegia, who was at the time also starting her own project, the CARE project, working together with indigenous communities in Argentina, and also my friend and colleague from our days at UC Davis, Tony DiFiore, with whom a few years after I started working with owl monkeys, we started also working with the titty monkeys and the saki monkeys at the Tiputini Biodiversity Station in Ecuador. So yes, it'll be 25 years next May, and hopefully there will be many more to come, but also hopefully with some of our younger colleagues taking the lead.
So you mentioned you work very closely with your wife, Claudia Valegia, and your children have also been out to your field site, and I believe two of them have co-published papers with you. What has the impact of your family been on your research?
The impact of my family being so close to my research has been huge. And it also works the other way. I mean, the impact of my research on my family life has been huge. I mean, particularly the two other sons, the ones that you see in these pictures back in the mid-90s and early 2000s, spent a lot of time, a lot of years in the field, setting up a fire, helping us take the truck out of the mud. So it was wonderful. It was really our weekend house, because the field site was only half hour from town where we used to live. It was fantastic experience. I could just go pick up the kids from school at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., and bring them and their friends to the backyard. And the backyard was going to camp and maybe feeding the caiman who was near the tent, or going into the forest, or building a tree house. So those are wonderful memories that I treasure. Them learning the work we do, I mean, them helping us find owl monkeys, sometimes finding armadillos, as in the picture where Joaquin is holding one. Fantastic opportunities for bonding with my sons. I think we all had a great time. And it really speaks to what is bringing us together today, right? I mean, this issue of fatherhood in our modern societies today, fatherhood in a way as we see it in non-human primates, and fatherhood as maybe it was back in the early days of our early common ancestors. So I have really enjoyed every single moment with them in the field. They miss it. We miss those chances of being all of us together down there. But it happens. It happens sometimes that all five of us again can go to the field. So it's been great. It's been great, and I look forward to keep doing it in the next few years as well.
Well, that's set us beautifully up for your talk. So let's turn the virtual floor over to you, Eduardo, and hear more about owl monkey fatherhood.
Okay, so we practiced all this with Ariel, so I know it's going to go beautifully. So
It will.
I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to open the presentation, and let's go straight on to some ideas and some data and some questions and more questions than answers that I want to share with you. And what does a penguin, what does a seahorse have to do with the topic that we have today? Well, you can easily relate to penguin dad taking care of the chick. Most of you probably have also heard the story of the fantastic male seahorse, not just only taking care of the little seahorses, but actually carrying the eggs in his pouch. And then that water beetle transporting the eggs on the outside part of the shell. So all the things you can find evidence of dads in all kinds of taxa. But you would be hard pressed to really close your eyes and picture a bull being a nice dad to a calf. It's usually mom and the calf. The same would apply if you're thinking dogs or cats. For most mammals, you would be hard pressed to find images that convey the cuteness of dad and his infants in close contact, like you can think of the penguins or the seahorses. And there's a reason for that. And it's a reason that we think may help us understand why and how paternal care by males, may have evolved in human societies, may have evolved in some of the non-human primates that I study. And the issue has to do with the specifics of how mammals reproduce, the reproductive biology of mammals. This is the same image that Ariel was showing us early on as we were going through the questions of some diagrams of an early ancestor couple where the female is pregnant. But the truth is that the male doesn't really know whether he is the sire of that future infant or not. There is uncertainty regarding who is the father because mammals have internal fertilization, and then they have pregnancy and lactation, where really males can do very, very little to contribute to the pregnancy and the lactation that the female is doing. So that conditions a little bit our understanding of when and why we would see primate dads in all of the primate species that we know of. This is just a part of a phylogeny, the way in which we organize the different types of primates. And the very simple point that I want to make here is that we do see male primates taking care of young in different groups of primates. Towards the right of the slide, you can see Homo, human beings. Of course, it happens. Hylobates in blue as well, the gibbons of Southeast Asia. But then I want to call your attention to the two kind of pinkish boxes that are signaling owl monkeys, genus Eotus, and titty monkeys, genus Calicebus. And this is something that may come up later when we go on another round of questions. But notice that Eotus and Calicebus, at least in this phylogeny, are not that closely related. But both taxa show wonderful dads. Now, both taxa, the titty monkeys that I'm showing you here on the left and the owl monkeys on the right, live in small group. They are pair-living monkeys, and they are pair-living. One male and one female form a pair, they establish a bond. That is already somewhat unusual among primates, and we think that may have played an important role in the evolution of male-female relationships in our early ancestors. Both taxa, titties and owl monkeys, also have a lot of paternal care. Again, illustrated here on the left by a male titty monkey transporting an infant, and on the right by an owl monkey transporting an infant. I go back to the first few slides. I mean, you wouldn't see this kind of affinity. You wouldn't see this kind of close connection between male and infant in most mammals, definitely not in the ones that I showed you before, but in most mammals. You see them only in some, you see it in some primates. Nowhere you see the extent of engagement of males with infants that we see in owl monkeys and titty monkeys. Let me show you some data speaking to this. This is a graph that is showing on the x-axis, the horizontal axis, the age of the infants in weeks. We're seeing how infants change from week 1 of their life to when they're roughly 4.5 months of age, 18 weeks. And then on the y-axis, I'm showing you how frequently that infant is on the back on the male. And you can see that except for the first week of life, when the male is transporting the infant very little time, after that, it's consistently the male who carries the infant most of the time. For 3 weeks of life, you're really talking roughly 90% of the time, the male transports the infant. So huge investment of the male in moving the infant around. That is just one way in which we describe paternal care. It happens. I mean, this is we saw the same. Owl monkeys seldom have twins, but in 2011, 2 groups have twins, and this lovely photograph is showing you one male transporting infants, twin infants. So even when they are twins, the male is the one who's spending most of the time and energy on the infants. They share food with the infants more than mom shares food. They play with the infant. They go to the rescue of the infant when the infant is squealing on distress because it cannot cross a somewhat kind of too wide gap in the canopy. So this is what I mean by very, very intense, committed paternal care in owl monkeys and titties. Why? So the question is, why do we see such intensity of paternal care in these specific monkeys? We can consider a couple of hypotheses for that. And let me say first that this care by the males definitely results or provides benefits to the infants when we look at the rate at which infants survive. I'm showing you here data for owl monkey infants. 162 infants that we have documented as being born survive out of 186 were recorded. That's about 90% of survival. For the titty monkeys in the Amazon, we have similar percentages. This is a relatively high survival of infants for primates overall. The question then is, what are the benefits to the male? I mean, let's go back to the diagram of this early ancestor walking and pondering, why should I be committing resources to the pregnancy of these females since I don't know if I'm the sire? There are 3 very simple explanations. We don't have time today for more than simple explanations. One is that there's a genetic advantage. If the male is in fact the sire, the biological father of that infant, by providing care to the infant, in a way, it's ensuring the survival of his own infant. That one is very straightforward. Another possibility is that the male, when he provides care, he's somehow helping the female, providing some relief to the mother. And that could also have a benefit to the male, because if the female is not depleted in her energy because of the male's help, she may be able to recover faster from a pregnancy and lactation. She may conceive again. She may have another infant faster. All those things would in turn help the success, the reproductive success of the males. The third possibility is that the male is not doing this because of benefits through the infant, but the male is just trying to secure future reproductive opportunities. The male is showing off. The male is saying, look at how much I can help you. Let me reproduce with you. What we call the mating strategy hypothesis. We have some data that can speak to some of these hypotheses. Are fathers, what we're calling fathers, indeed the biological fathers? And what we did is we captured lots of fathers and lots of infants, and we obtained biological samples, and we did genetic testing. We determined if that male who was providing care of the young was in fact the biological father. And what we learned, and that for all the samples we analyzed, the infant had always been taken care by the genetic father. There had been no cheating. Females were not having infants with males outside the group. So this is speaking in favor of the idea that the male is providing care for an infant he has sired. It is not always the case that infants are in the group with their biological fathers, because in our monkeys we have shown that sometimes these lovely pairs, male and female pair, get broken by somebody who comes from the outside and challenges the male or the female, what we describe in the title here as intruders. Intruders coming and kicking out the adult of the same sex they are and moving in. This is really your neighbor not knocking on the door, actually, breaking into your house, kicking you out, and staying with your partner. And this happens both by males and females. When that happens, what this graph shows you is that pairs that manage to stay together produce about 25% more infants than pairs that are broken. Those are the numbers on the left. If you just have one partner, on average, you produce 7.9 infants in a 10-year period. If somebody moves in, somebody forces his or her way into the pair, now you produce fewer infants. So there is a cost for this replacing of partners for adults. But more importantly, for the conversation we're having today, are the costs to the infants. And this is the last piece of data I want to share with you. Look at this graph. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis, we're looking at who are the adults that are present in the group during the first year of life of the infant. It could be that you just have a new female. Mom was kicked out, and now I have a new female. Maybe mom is there, the biological mother. Maybe you have a new male because the biological father was kicked out. Maybe you have both biological parents. The age of when infants disappear, the age of infants when infants die, seems to be related to who is in the group. And I hope you can see with me that the box showing the survival of infants when a new male is in the group is substantially lower than the age when infants disappear, when both biological parents are there, or when the mother is replaced. So what we think this is telling us is that the infants really need the presence of the male to do well, not just through the first few months when they are dependent infants, but even when they are as old as an year old. So this is speaking of the fact that if you remove father presence, it has a negative effect on the survival of infants. This is not because the new male is aggressive to the infant. This is for the lack of care provided by the replaced biological father. So just to conclude, we are finding data suggesting that the genetics advantage hypothesis and the maternal relief hypothesis seem to explain a little bit more what we observe than the mating strategy. Of course, none of these hypotheses have been conclusively rejected or accepted. We continue collecting data, and I'll be delighted to talk about that some more when we move on to the questions and answers. So I want to thank you, and definitely thank all the institutions that have made all this research possible in a very central location on this slide, the Leakey Foundation, because they have been great and they have been supporting the project ever since I began. So thank you to the foundation, and thank you all for joining us today.
I do have an initial question for you, because beyond the scope of your research, you and your wife, Claudia, are very, very committed to both conservation and community. In 1999, you founded the Fundación Eco, which is has added the component of education to the mission of the Owl Monkey Project. Could you talk more about the scope of this program?
Yes, I couldn't not. Fundación ECHO and our colleagues, Analia and Ernesto, who are there running the Fundación ECHO, are the ones who make all this possible. It started in 1999, a few years after we went to Formosa to work. Claudia and I would come back home. She would come back from the village where she works, and I would come back from the forest. And then again, we would find ourselves talking about the need to work on education. For the two of us as Argentinians, going back 25 years and coming from Buenos Aires, it was a wow. I mean, just realizing how different some of our provinces were from our reality in Buenos Aires. Oh. And that was quite shocking. That really moved us. And we were getting started, and we thought that education was really a theme that was bridging Claudia's research, Claudia's interests, and mine. And so in 1999, thanks to one of our most important mentors, Rudy Rudran, we went to see him at the Asunción, Paraguay International Airport, as he was having some kind of stop between places he was traveling. And I remember vividly driving to Asunción just to have coffee with him. And he said, guys, you have to give some format to this. You have to establish an NGO. And so we went back to Formosa and we started working, and we created Fundación ECHO. So it's been now 21 years that we're running Fundación ECHO. It's a small NGO, absolutely volunteer driven. Analia and Ernesto have been the main players keeping it going when we moved to the States to take permanent jobs in the States now 15 years ago. We provide scholarships. We try to do our best to give people who want to finish high school or complete some kind of technical degree or go to the university. We do training courses. In the past, we've done primate conservation biology training courses where students from all of Latin America have come. In relationship to the Leakey Foundation, one of the jewels that the foundation has, we're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Eduardo Fernandez-Duque, who was an emeritus biological anthropology professor at Harvard. He donated his whole library to Fundación ECHO. So when students can visit us, and if some of you listening ever come visit us, you'll have the chance to really browse through the 2,000 books that he donated, an amazing collection, as well as more than 10,000 reprints from his personal collection. So that's what we do with Fundación ECHO. It's a lot of reward. I mean, we really enjoy doing it, and I cannot underestimate how important it is, the help we get from our friends and colleagues down in Formosa. I mentioned Analia and Ernesto, Marcelo, Alba, Sofia, all of them make it possible, and we thank them all.
Great. Well, we're going to take our first question from the audience. Fascinating research, Eduardo. Thank you for sharing. Are these owl monkeys nocturnal? If so, what kind of additional challenges does this present in conducting your research?
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to answer that and bring some reassurance to those of you that we could have been able to do all this working only during the night. Owl monkeys are the only monkeys in all of the Americas that have any kind of nocturnal habits. If you decide to go study owl monkeys anywhere from Panama, which is the further end of the northern end of the range, down to the Rio Madre de Dios in Bolivia, you'll be stuck with studying them only at night. These guys are going to come out of some tree hole when the sun sets. They'll be active during the night, and then they'll go sleep again before the sun rises. In Argentina and in Paraguay, and this is something we know going back to 1981 when Patricia Wright completed her doctoral dissertation, we know that owl monkeys have activity day and night. Primatologists call them cathemeral. We know that they go through the full repertoire, the complete repertoire of their behavioral patterns, both days and night. So what we do is we focus all of our studies these days primarily from very, very early on at dawn through late in the evening. Unless we're studying their circadian biology, the biology of their rhythms, we're not really doing behavioral research at night, because even with the most sophisticated technologies, it's very, very difficult to collect data from nocturnal owl monkeys. I want to mention that there's a very, very energetic group of young colleagues in Colombia. We're seeing the first data on identify animals. After Patricia's right work in Peru, there were some smaller attempts, but we're finally seeing some solid data spanning years and groups coming from Colombia by Andres Link and some of his students. So it's very, very exciting. But no, we did not do everything we've done working at night.
So we have another question. How have advancements in telemetry changed the way you collect data now?
Excellent question, Craig. And please, all of you, I'll be delighted to find other opportunities. Just follow up with a message if you'd like to talk some more about anything that I've described or what we do. Telemetry has been huge for us. It hasn't been easy. There were lots and lots of challenges and people questioning it. But starting in 2000, we started capturing animals. We have done close to 300 captures of owl monkeys, having put radio collars on close to 200 of them. And it's been amazing because it allows us to track animals when they leave the group where they're born. It has allowed us to recover animals who died, which is something you seldom recover the full body, the full skeleton of an animal in the forest. So we needed to capture them. Telemetry has, we these days, I mean, when we have colors in the groups, we can go through 10 groups in a square kilometer in just one morning, checking the composition of the groups, checking where the baby was born. So it is absolutely fundamental. That's why I was so pleased to see that Andres Link and his group are trying to take advantage of telemetry, and they have radio colored 2 different species of owl monkeys in Colombia. So it promises to be very, very exciting. We have learned about these floaters, these intruders, only thanks to telemetry. So it's been huge. Yeah.
And we have another question. If a goal is to produce many offspring, what are the benefits of monogamy? Is mating coerced even in a bonded pair?
That's a more complicated question to answer than the previous 2, because it goes at the core of some of the big questions that drive research in the evolutionary biology of primates and all taxa, in the evolutionary biology of mating systems and social systems. Why do we have a system where it is just one male and one female? And the traditional explanations usually start from assuming that something about the environment, something about the habitat limits the number of females that can get together, and or the number of females that males can defend. That's your kind of traditional textbook description of how the ecological setting may condition the number of males and females who may get together. So, and the second part was is mating coerced in pair living taxa, right? Well, coercion could get us to talk a lot about how you define that. A male and a female owl monkey coordinate their activities much, and they travel together, and they feed together, and then eventually they huddle and they mate and they have infants together. I would not describe the mating in our monkeys as in any coercive way, in the way that we sometimes hear you may see with some of the old world monkeys or say orangutans. Now, what's interesting is that we sometimes get the impression that these intruders are kind of forcing their way into the group. But that has been very, very difficult to get the specifics, because so we have a pair, male and female, and they've been partners for some time, they have infants. And Now we notice we're in the forest and we notice that there is a floater. There's one of these intruders whom we know are going to bring chaos and are going to be challenging the pair. But documenting that in detail is complicated because now you have 3, 4, 5 relatively small monkeys. Remember that owl monkeys weigh 1.2 kilograms, about 3 pounds, running like crazy, chasing each other on the canopy, anywhere between 15 and 40 feet high. And so it has been difficult for us to pinpoint if when a male is trying to challenge the pair, is it only the male that reacts or is it both? In the last couple of years, we've tried to get at that. And Alba Garcia de la Chica, who is a PhD, also a Leakey Foundation grantee, has been looking at this through experiments, doing playbacks where you can simulate intruders. And we are getting for the first time the impression that the first response, if it is a male that's going to come in, is primarily from males. And if it is a female, the response is from females. But sometimes we also get this idea that eventually these intruders, through fights, if they manage to really hurt, wound, or kill the resident adult, are forcing their way into the group. Now, once you're in the group, I wouldn't describe that they are forcing the mating on the opposite sex individual. But the process by which they move into the group is definitely not pleasant. It's through aggression, which is something that we didn't know. That people who have raised owl monkeys in captivity have always known that owl monkeys can be very, very aggressive. You cannot have 2 male owl monkeys in the same cage. You cannot have 2 female owl monkeys in the same cage. But that had not been documented in the field.
That's really fascinating. So I think we have a few more questions. What is the relationship of parental care and the possibility of having twins? What is the survival rate of both twins?
Thank you, Patty. What is the relationship of paternal care and the possibility of having twins? Well, that relationship has been pondered a lot among other group of primates that exist in the Americas, the callitrichids, the marmosets and tamarins, these relatively smaller primates that you can find in the Amazon basin, because they produce twins regularly, and males help. In the case of the marmosets and tamarins, siblings help as well. So the argument has been made that this twinning, those primates are producing twins twice a year, may have been facilitated because males and siblings are helping. Twinning in owl monkeys is very rare. I think we have documented it clearly twice in these 25 years. There are a couple of other instances where maybe it happened. And then in both groups, only one of the infants survived. Both twins survived, if I remember well, for at least 2 or 3 months. But by the age of 6 months, only one twin was left. It was quite interesting to see that the mother was not doing more than she was doing with singletons. It really came down to the father. And the siblings were not recruited either. In owl monkeys and titties, something that we haven't really studied well. Why is it that the siblings are not helping? It's just mom and dad. But even with the twins, sibling help was not recruited. The reason that I find the lack of engagement of the siblings fascinating, and this I can relate to humans, because these are the same individuals who are going to be wonderful fathers and mothers a few years later. So we know how important it is to learn these behaviors through personal experience. But these males are not helping with their brothers and sisters when they're young. So they've never handled an infant. Until now, you're a father for the first time, and there you are, and you're doing an amazing job. So that lots of fascinating questions to understand the development of paternal care in these individuals.
Sounds like there are several ideas for future Leakey Foundation grants. Let's take another question from, how do these pair bonds succeed in captivity?
Thank you, Jean-Marie. Captivity is tricky, and it's created sometimes confusion, because remember that when you establish a captive colony of primates, which have been extremely important. I'm very, very supportive and understanding. I think our best science comes from looking at systems in their natural setting in the wild, but also there's a lot we learn from studying animals in captivity. A huge, huge progress in our understanding of infant care has come from research by colleagues studying them, primates in captivity. But the problem is that many times, because these colonies start as breeding colonies, they just set them up so that there's one male and one female. So when people started breeding marmosets and tamarins, they have been, even today, some people describe them as monogamous, but they're only monogamous because the colonies are set up like that. Marmosets and tamarins are not consistently pair living in the field. The pair bond, so you establish these pairs and they don't always succeed. There's a large colony of owl monkeys in Bastrop, Texas, and my colleague Larry Williams is in charge of it. He's published some papers describing the specifics of how some pairs just don't get along. So I don't remember the percentage, but sometimes you have to keep trying to pair this male with a certain female, because you throw them into a cage. You're not allowing them to sort through potential partners like I'm sure they do in the field. So you're making the decision. And those decisions, for reasons that we don't understand, sometimes are not the right ones. And you form a pair and the animals do not reproduce, the animals do not get along well. You have to find other partners.
We have one last question. Thanks, Eduardo.
Well, I know this guy.
Yeah. For the wonderful historical overview of the work you and your colleagues have done in Argentina, can you talk a bit about vocal communication in owl monkeys?
Thank you, Tony. Yes, I can only talk a bit. I shouldn't talk more than a bit about vocal communication in owl monkeys. I think that the first exciting progress we've made on understanding vocal communication has happened in the last 2-3 years, thanks to the doctoral research of Alba Garcia de la Chica. So finally, we were able to analyze in detail recordings we obtained in 2008, and we have shown that owl monkeys show sexual dimorphism in their calls. Owl monkeys and titties, something that's quite common in pair-living, sexually monogamous taxa, the male and the female are very difficult to tell apart. And so we're always looking for evidence that the sexes are different. Of course they're different, but sometimes it's not obvious to us. I'm sure it's obvious to them. And so we finally found evidence that the males and the females are producing different calls, what we call the hoot call. This is a very low pitch vocalization that we think they use for communicating over long distances. The females and the males are producing different types of calls. Something that Patricia Wright and Moynihan had suggested back in the 60s, and then Pat also suggested in the 80s when she studied owl monkeys for her dissertation. So we now have evidence suggesting that they are indeed different calls by males and females, and males and females respond differently to the presentation of those calls. The other thing that we've learned through the playback experiments that I was describing before is that definitely that the responses are sex specific, and that the animals seem to respond more in something that resembles guarding their mates than guarding a territory. When we do these playback experiments where we simulate the presence of an intruder in different parts of the territory, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whether I simulate that I'm knocking on your door to the house, or if I'm knocking on the door to your room, right? It doesn't really matter. But who is knocking at the door, whether it is a male or a female, seems to be much more important than where they are. So this is speaking to us of maybe some evidence that really the animals are responding to a potential competitor, to somebody else who may come and challenge me more than a potential competitor for food. Now, Tony, we still lack. I think there's so much more that we can do in fully describing the repertoire, the vocalizations, all the range of calls they have, and the context in which they occur. There is a young, energetic Colombian student, Paula Erazo. We've been talking over the last few months, all of us interested in owl monkeys, and she's doing her undergraduate thesis, trying to understand vocalizations in owl monkeys spanning different taxa. I really think that there's a lot of potential for looking at vocalizations because being nocturnal species, they are likely to rely on olfaction and calls much more than maybe more visual daily species. But I think we've just scratched the surface of understanding vocalizations in owl monkeys.
We have one more question from the audience. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your research and the research of your colleagues?
Thanks, Age. It has affected our research. So to give you, I'll start by giving everyone a bit of a context of something that we're all very proud. Not only has the project been going on for 25 years, but it's been going on year-round. This is a year-round operation. When we do the numbers and we look at these 25 years, the number of hours that we've been in contact with the animals, it comes down to something, if I remember well, roughly 4 hours every day of every week of every year for 25 years. And that's thanks to the people who are down there in Formosa. First and foremost, Marcelo Rotundo, and then all of the PhD students who've contributed to that. So we have a year-round operation. That simplified our functioning during the COVID because as long as Argentina was allowing us to go to the field, we could. We didn't have to worry about international considerations. We work in a private ranch. That also made it easier because between March and almost August, we didn't do anything because the ranch closed. They told us, no, we don't want you here. And then the province said, no traveling back and forth between the city and the ranch. Starting in August, it is possible now where we are to request permission to drive to the ranch. And so we're roughly the last few months, Marcelo and Alba and Griet van der Heide, who's another PhD student, they're going, give or take, between 3 or 4 days a week. They just go once, stay and come back. And they've been able to do that and keeping an eye on the owl monkeys much better since August. The challenges have been that I haven't been there since February. It's been extremely complicated with issues of equipment, supplies, moving funding back and forth. All that has made it very, very difficult. On top of that, Argentina had a huge drought this month, which had nothing to do with COVID, but it has been a very, very rough time for all animals in the forest. And we're noticing that in the birth season that is coming to an end now, we've had the fewest infants born in 25 years. A remarkably small number of infants born, and we think that was because of the drought. I don't think it was COVID.
Well, before we close, I have one final question for you, which is, do you have any advice for those watching today that are interested in studying animal behavior?
Yes, I used to cite, I don't remember the name of the person, but I used to always show my students this quote, speaking to the fact that sometimes we're not candid enough with our students, that we do what we like. We do what we do because we like it. Most of us do not choose this after careful considerations of the science implications of what we do. So if your heart is with being in the outdoors, if your heart is with studying animals, go for it. And that's really, I know it sounds almost cliche, but I really truly believe that you need that. And then if you can force yourself, if you can allow yourself to imagine that maybe you really need to be looking at that first season, that first year, as the first of 25. Things will be so much easier. Don't assume in how you plan, in how you organize your data, in how you organize your photographs. We were discussing with
Yeah.
Ariel before we started today, because then things happen and there's no time for making up for things you didn't plan ahead when you were beginning. So there's no substitute for lots and lots and lots of thinking and planning ahead before you actually go to the field. Talk to peers, talk to your advisors. Don't reinvent the wheel, because then things that we do wrong, and my goodness, we did a lot of things wrong, and you can never fix them.
Well, Eduardo, thank you so much for being here today. This was such a great way to end this year of lunch break science.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, like it's always been, being in dialogue and collaboration with the foundation. I look forward to doing more of this. And thank you all who joined us. And please don't hesitate to email me if you'd like to learn more about the project, if you'd like to see what possibilities we have for anything from teachers. I don't know who's out there, but we're always talking that it's fantastic when we have a chance to talk to school teachers or high school or elementary, or if you're writing a book, or if you want to have data for a thesis, just get in touch with us. We look forward to hearing from you all. And thank you so much for joining us.
Again, just thank you. Next time on Lunch Break Science, we meet scientist Christopher Schmidt and learn about the development and life histories of primates, especially vervet monkeys. Stay tuned after the episode to hear more about Leakey Foundation programs. Thank you all for taking a break from your day and feeding your brain with the Leakey Foundation. Until we see you back here in 2021, stay hungry for knowledge. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Lunch Break Science is brought to you by the Leakey Foundation and is made possible by the generous support of the Anna Gordon Getty Foundation and Camilla and George Smith. Visit us at leakeyfoundation.org to learn more about the Leakey Foundation, today's guest scientists, and how you can help support human evolution research and educational programs like Lunch Break Science. Join the Leakey Foundation, today's guest, Eduardo Fernandez-Duque, and several other renowned scientists to raise money for the Primate Research Fund through an exclusive summer travel series of events on June 25th, July 7th, and August 26th. Click the link we've shared in the chat or visit leakeyfoundation.org to learn more. All donations to the Primate Research Fund will be quadrupled by generous donors, meaning your support will be quadrupled. Miss an episode of Lunch Break Science? Catch up on past episodes and browse our library of Leakey Foundation lectures on our YouTube channel. Still hungry for science and can't wait till our next episode? Check out the Leakey Foundation's award-winning podcast, Origin Stories, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the Leakey Foundation's YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or sign up for our newsletter to be the first to hear about exciting upcoming episodes and programs, as well as groundbreaking discoveries in human evolution research.